I have the ultrasound PICC trainers. We have one in a pigmented, opaque coloration, and then one that's clear and allows you to see the vasculature underneath. That vascular features a bifurcated vessel with a 5mm and a 3mm vein, as well as a 3mm vein with a valve on it. And it also features a non-collapsing artery that runs straight down the middle. So that'll be covered in the future. The opaque model has the exact same vasculature, it's just invisible to the naked eye and will only show up under ultrasound. So when you're ready to use one of these models and you want to prime it, you can prime directly from a syringe. I'm priming from a IV bag filled with 50 milliliters of our blood solution because that'll help provide the flashback you need for visual confirmation later on. I'm going to go ahead and hook up my IV bag to the larger of the two vessels. That's the bifurcated one, rather than the vessel with a valve in it. And that'll just help it fill a little more smoothly. So I'm going to go ahead, hook that up. I'm going to remove my lure cap from the other side. So I'm open to the air. I'm going to open up my IV bag. I'm going to give it a little bit of height here as well. And we should see the blood starts to fill. I'm going to turn it over, give my IV bag a little more height, and I'm waiting. Again, you could be using a syringe for this. I'm waiting until I see blood start to return out of the bottom end here. At that point, I'm going to go ahead and flip this back over. This is where the tower comes in handy. But once that bag has filled to the top, I'm going to go ahead. I should be getting just a little bit of bleed back out of this valve. I'm going to go ahead and close this up with my cap. So all the air is now out of this model, and you can clearly see the vasculature reflected in the dark blood color. So once your model is all set up, I'm not using an ultrasound for this exercise just because I'm using the clear model. I can very easily see it. I can take your IV catheter of choice. Anything works on this model. We do recommend using a 23 gauge or smaller needle. Just preserves the lifespan of the model, and we expect to get 1,000 sticks out of that. And I can go ahead, select my vessel, orient my needle, and it's a little tricky if you're doing this under ultrasound, but you should successfully get flash in your chamber, at which point you could do full deployment. I don't have wings on this catheter or anything, but that would be all set, ready to go. You can now even go ahead and take a syringe, and I could get a blood sample from that bag. That's part of why having that flash and that live hookup is so important. You no longer lose air or lose fluid and get air stuck within your model. Again, a pigmented and a clear model. They have the exact same vasculature. This 5mm vessel that bifurcates, it has an additional 3mm vessel splitting off of it, as well as another 3mm vein with a valve that we'll cover later, and a non-collapsing 4mm artery. So all of those are important landmarks to hit, and we'll go ahead and kind of scan down the model here. And so we can see under our probe, I'm right now centered on the largest vessel, and we can see there's another dark spot of an artery next to it. You can see the artery more clearly by trying to collapse the vein under pressure. And as I scan down, we'll also see this vein bifurcate, and it will split off into a smaller vessel, and these two will continue alongside each other with the artery nicely wrapping around and sandwiched between the two. On the other side of the model, it's a much simpler line. There's a single 5mm vessel, or a 3mm vessel, This one has a rising falling nature to it. So rather than staying at the same depth throughout the tissue, we can see it actually climbs towards the top of the tissue and then falls sharply towards the end. This is important landmarks for deciding where you're actually going to set IV catheter or PIV or a PICC line. Additionally, the last feature that's in this is you can see a brief blip right there, and while that's slightly stronger than we'd like it to be, I'll turn into the longitudinal axis and we can actually see that that is a valve. So I've got two different trapdoor kind of mechanisms there, and I can squeeze my tubing, my external tubing, or I could squeeze the model itself, or I could squeeze a syringe or a bell if I had such a thing attached, and we can actually watch that valve pulse under that flow. It doesn't take much. So, to demonstrate a catheter insertion, you can take whatever your catheter of choice is. I'm using a 22 gauge safety catheter, but anything would be fine. And I can go ahead and pick whatever my point is. I'm going to say centered right on that vessel. I can start with my needle tip facing inwards. And right there, I can find the tip of my needle. It's a bit hard to point at the screen and operate this at the same time, but you can locate your needle tip as soon as it hits the surface, and then I can walk it down until I am centered in the vessel just like that, and I will start to receive some flash in the chamber, and that's a good sign, so I can go ahead, deploy this. My catheter is all set. I could go ahead and even take a blood draw if I wanted to, because again, this is hooked up to a IV bag. It's getting positive pressure. So I can take a blood draw. I can pull my catheter, and I'm going to go ahead and just highlight that spot we just poked, because as you can see, there's very minimal, if not any visible tracking from where that needle was. Again, that's why I recommend using something larger, or a smaller needle in a 22 gauge. Just helps preserve the life of this, but using a 22, a 23 gauge needle, we expect to get 1,000 sticks out of one of these models. And then once you're all done, ready to flush out your model, you can go ahead, you can recover some of this blood if you want to with a syringe. I'm going to in this case, but it's really not necessary by any means. Just going to go ahead and pull some of that, replenish, and then once you're ready, you can go ahead and disconnect your IV bag. And I'm going to do this in the same order. So I'm going to remove the cap from the 3mm vessel side. I'm going to remove the cap from the 5mm vessel side. I'm going to start by just letting this all drain out. Should be very easy to get most of the fluid out. And then to preserve the life of the model, you should be flushing this and letting it dry. Water is okay. Isopropyl alcohol is even better. So I've got a small syringe on hand. I'm going to go ahead and hook up to the same 5mm side that we used to prime the model. And kind of do the same process. So starting upside down. The upside down is just to make sure we get fluid through both sides of the bifurcation, as they're both in the circuit. And I can go ahead, flush that whole thing. And once again, disconnect your syringe, let the model drain, let it dry, and go ahead and recap it. You'd be good to use this again.